English at Ashoka is not simply English as in the English language. Nor is it just English as it's been studied at high school. It involves many languages, it involves many disciplines, and in general it involves thinking what we call centrifugally, away from the center, moving across borders of discipline, of period, of culture, of language. And the objective is to draw unexpected connections. So we have a very interdisciplinary major, and that's something that is also very prominent in our graduate programs as well.
English, as Gil said, is more of a heuristic than a description of a kind of literature that you read. So English for us is a capacious term that describes multiple possibilities, multiple horizons of possibility, multiple ways of thinking, multiple ways of being in the world. And so the literature master's and PhD program, the English master's and PhD program that we're offering at Ashoka are not necessarily catered to chronological specificity, but to conceptual rigor, not to particularities of who wrote when and lived when, but theoretical possibilities of what it means to write in the first place.
Ashoka has done phenomenally well where undergrad studies and undergrad pedagogy are concerned. And I think now it's also time to sort of launch ourselves as, once again, a cutting-edge university where graduate students are concerned. So the English department of Ashoka, where I belong, we are hoping to start both a Master's of English program and also as a PhD program. And we are looking for graduate students that come from diverse constituencies. And really speaking, what we would look for, of course, is apart from a certain research aptitude, is a student who's restless, a student who's bothered by certain questions and is not afraid of exploring those questions in ways that we do, which is to sort of break boundaries across disciplines. And that's really the character of Ashoka, and we are hoping that there are students who would be able to appreciate that and join us.
In terms of working with us as teachers, as faculty, students can expect that we will set a very high standard, I think, in terms of the standard of thinking, of writing. You're always going to be pushed to think a little better, a little more clearly, to make your reasoning clearer. But it's also, there's a lot of freedom, and I think that can be exhilarating. You'll be encouraged to think about whatever you find important. And there will be a lot of work with us. There's a kind of close relationship that we build with our students, which allows us to mentor students and allow them to build, to meet that standard that we're setting.
I think Ashoka offers a graduate student something which is really missing out in other universities in India, which is a great interdisciplinary environment. Ashoka has strengths in not just English, but also in disciplines like history, psychology, political science. So a graduate student in Ashoka is not merely learning to think within one discipline, but is learning to think and grow as a scholar.
The department now has very diverse range of people who work with Sufi poetry, Bhakti literature, Indian literature, post-colonial literature, queer and sexuality studies, and I think we are the big story. I think this kind of range that sort of spans across English, European, Indian literature is very, very hard to find, and it's an extremely nurturing department where students are sort of very lovingly and with great care taken through an entire period of incubation. So I think for students it's just going to be a huge break to be able to join us.
So my home area is 19th century British literature and culture, Victorian literature mainly, but more broadly colonial discourse cutting across the centuries all the way up to contemporary Anglophone post-colonial literature and literary theory.
I'm interested in the history of science in Europe, and I read literature not as an exclusive body of knowledge, but as something that grows out of and often includes other problems like scientific investigation or experiment. And all of our faculty, I think, are bringing something more to the table than just the set of knowledge about particular authors.
My areas of intellectual interest are comparative Indian literatures, in particular Kashmiri, Hindi and Urdu literature. I also work in the fields of cinema studies and Sufism studies. I'm also interested more generally in the intellectual history of Islam in South Asia, as well as continental philosophy.
I would be overjoyed if there are students who are comfortable reading in Indian languages, in Hindi, Gujarati, Marathi, Bengali, and who wish to work here on issues of translation, not only translating from a text, but also understanding what the cultural politics of translation is. So I'm actually hoping to have a very strong sort of dimension of, for want of a better word, of vernacularity that a student may bring to us. And that's the kind of student that I'm personally sort of looking for. I also work a lot on regions such as Gujarat, Sindh, Partition, and I work on Bollywood studies as well. So those areas are also available, and we would be very happy if students have any queries and wish to write to us about what they want to work on.
I specialize in a variety of subfields, including Shakespeare, but the kind of Shakespeare I do is what I call masala Shakespeare. It's about Shakespeare in the Indian context, how he's been reimagined, appropriated, completely reconstructed. I also work on foreigners who came to India and became Indian. There's a running theme there.
My bread and butter is Shakespeare. My first 3 books were on Shakespeare. But my work all through, including in Shakespeare, is on sexuality. I work in queer theory. I am a theorist by training and profession. So I think about sexuality everywhere all the time. The book that I just finished, Gil's book that he just finished, is called The First Firangis. So you get a sense of his specialization. And the book that I just finished is called A History of Desire in India, which is really thinking about queer theory in relation to several landing points in India.
I work in the digital humanities, which basically means that I use computers to look at books. So traditional scholarship, you're looking at 2, 3, 4, 5, maybe 10 books when you're doing a study. And what I do is I look at 1,000 books at the same time to see if there's any underlying patterns. What makes this research so exciting is that you're really at the cutting edge of what literary studies can do, while still working with many of the methodologies that set literary studies apart from other disciplines.
If you are thinking through a question for many, many years, if you want to think through that question among a vibrant community of scholars and students, then Ashoka graduate program in English is the place for you to be.